So the terminology we use is swap until you drop. What that means is with a DST, typically when you buy one of these, the plan is you're not going to own it for the next 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
There's a business plan associated with each one of them. And generally within 7 years or so, the DST property is going to be sold.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, you have a liquidating event and you have a decision to make. Either A, pay the tax now,
Mm-hmm.
which would be a bad decision, or B, you could then do another 1031 exchange by another physical property that you want to manage, or go into yet another DST once that real estate in your DST is sold. So the term for that is called swap until you drop.
Mm-hmm.
And more than 90% of investors that go into DSTs stay with them. Generally, the reason they may not stay with one is because if you were that beneficiary that inherited the property,
mm-hmm.
you don't have a tax liability, you may not want to put your money
Yep.
into that real estate. At that point, your children have the option. They can invest in a lot of different things and not just have it concentrated into real estate. So again, the advantages to doing a DST are tremendous. And then when you combine that with the advantages of a 1031 exchange, if it meets all your needs, it's definitely something you have to consider.
I want to speak personally on that in a second, but just a couple quick questions on it. If you were in a DST and you went through that 5-7 years and they complete that business plan and sell it, let's say you invested $1 million and they sell it for $1,500,000, so 1.5. I think it's important for everybody to know you're not only gaining in the asset of the appreciation of that real estate value, but there's oftentimes distributions that are coming to you monthly, quarterly, so forth, while you're owning that, just as you would be taking profits if you owned a building and people are paying rent. You just literally get those distributions coming to you while you have that money invested in that particular asset. And you, at that point, leading to the question, when you go up to that 1.5 from the 1 million you invested, do you get a step up in basis to that 1.5, or do you, if you were to roll it into a new DST, are you now at a $1.5 million basis, or are you still at that 1 plus the 500,000 of gain that you were? So in other words, do you get a carry forward like it does upon death, or do you owe back to what you would initially have owned back when you sold the property for the first time and could have realized that gain?
Yeah, so when you do a DST, you basically do a 1031 exchange into a DST. Whatever your cost basis was on that original property,
mm-hmm.
that will continue to be your cost basis indefinitely.
Okay.
Because it's just tax deferral.
Got it.
Any future appreciation, you'll want to defer that as well into your next deal. So that you just keep kicking the can down the road, literally until you die, and then your family gets to step up in basis.
Yep.
So it doesn't eliminate that. Another important point, I'm glad you brought that up, is if you, let's say you sold the property, your office building, you had no mortgage on it, and that property, you received $500,000 for it. You buy into a DST, you can buy into a DST that has no debt. So you'll get $500,000 worth of real estate, no different than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of DSTs will come with debt. They already have mortgages built into them.
Mm-hmm.
So your $500,000, if you go into a DST that has 50% leverage, you'll be buying $1 million worth of real estate
mm-hmm.
for your $500,000. What that does for you is, number one, you have more money invested, but also now that extra $500,000 that you just bought, you could start depreciating that all over again over that 39-year period.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to create more of that phantom deduction depreciation for many, many years to come. Another important point, your comment before made me think of a lot of other things I should have brought up. But let's say you sold your building for $500,000,
yep.
and you ended up having to give the government $200,000 in tax. Now you only have $300,000 to invest wherever you're going to invest, whether it be another piece of real estate, stocks, or whatever. Being that you did a 1031 exchange, you have the full $500,000
yep.
working for you forever. So now you're not only making money on what is your money after taxes,
mm-hmm.
but you're making money on the money you didn't have to give up to the government. So let's assume it's 30% more that you've managed to keep. That means if you're earning 5%, you're really earning more than 5%, right? Because you're earning 5% of what you would have had to pay the tax.
Right.
plus you're making 5% on that other 30%.
Yep.
So the compounding effect of that over many years and decades, it's tremendous. So these are definitely on the top of my list of wealth building strategies.
Mm-hmm.
These are tax smart strategies, real estate tax smart strategies. If you're not taking advantage of it, I hate to use the term, you're being tax stupid, but it's not tax smart, it's tax stupid. You're just throwing money away to the government unnecessarily. If the government allows you to do this, and it's perfectly within the parameters of the law, why not take advantage?
I'll just say from a personal standpoint, it played out exactly like you said. The X's and O's of when you go to implement the sale of the building and getting the qualified intermediary and identifying at 45 days, it can be a little stressful. You've got usually at that time in someone's life, there's a lot going on when they're selling the property, business transition and practice transition. So it can be, I think it intimidates some people up front, but it's not that big a deal. You have advisors that guide you through it, you and your team and the qualified intermediary, attorney that's involved in the real estate attorney, and you just kind of go through that transaction. And then you have the 180 days. And just to speak to how your team handled it, which was very easy, was because you're doing the due diligence and vetting these properties, which I would tell people, you want to make sure you work with someone like John who understands this DST arena, because you don't want to get taken by a scam or some sort of property that you're going to throw the money in and you don't know what's going to happen to it. So John would vet these companies and would just periodically, in that 180-day window, we knew our stop point. You and I both communicated, okay, by this point we have to identify, and by this point we have to close. We just said in that window, let's just kind of see what comes at us. And we ended up having some options where, like you meant, storage units in the Midwest, and one had, I think, multiple storage units in different states. And then there was one in an apartment complex in Arizona, and assisted living facility in St. Louis. And so Amazon distribution center in Florida. So we just started looking at these different properties. You would send them to me with a summary of what their sort of balance sheets were on the projected revenues. And I would look at them, and then when we got to the point that we had to kind of make that decision, we just looked at what would be best for my particular situation and what I felt most comfortable in. And I own some, have assets in storage units already, and I have some assets in luxury apartment buildings. So for me, getting into the retired assisted living facility was another way, as you said, to diversify a little bit. Yeah. And could I have gone into a storage unit? Sure, but I already have some investments in that. So it was a really nice way to do it, and it worked really well, and it was seamless. And working with you and your team, it was executed perfectly, and now it's just there, and you get the revenue distribution process, checks coming through is just a standard process, and then your assets growing from there. So it really is. I mean, versus if I just taken that money, paid taxes on it, and then invested it post tax, even if you invested in paper assets or a different, you have to gain. You and I spent a lot of time talking about it and running some of the numbers, but I would have had to catch up on to try to make that money back that I lost in taxes on day one. I mean, you probably never would catch it. And then you have the other tax advantages of the step up in basis, where keep continuing to roll it in, and then on your death, step up in basis. So yeah, it's a really cool asset vehicle, and I think something that I hope more docs take advantage of while it's still available, because it was really a great thing.